Hey y'all, okay, so today is day 5 of Bible study. I keep waking the baby up. Okay, so today is titled Thursday, and the title is Failure That Leads to Victory. So today's scripture is John 18 through John 19:16 and Luke 22:41 through Luke 23:25. Okay, she went back to sleep. Okay, so this one, failure that leads to victory. So we're going to do the black and white context of what I read and then what I got from it, and then we'll get into the study part. So Jesus and his disciples they went into a garden over the brook of Cedron. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. So they traveled, they went into this garden, and it was a place where Jesus and his disciples had gone many times before. And so with this being said, Judas knew the place. So to give you a backstory, if you haven't been with me through each day, Judas he made a deal with the priests and Pharisees and soldiers, etc., the Romans. So he made a deal with them that they would give him gold or silver or whatever. They'd give him money in exchange for him giving them Jesus. So Judas is one of Jesus' disciples. He was the 12th disciple. We learned that in one of the previous studies that we just did. And so Judas knew where Jesus and the disciples were, being he had been there before. So Judas led the priests and these men, or soldiers, with weapons and torches, and they all go and they meet at the garden. And when they arrive, Jesus asked them, well, who are you looking for? And now this is in layman terms, because he really actually says, like, who seek ye, or something like that. So anyways, he pretty much said, who are you looking for? And they replied, Jesus of Nazareth. Or, yeah, don't let me butcher that. Jesus of Nazareth, I believe is what they said. And so Jesus said, I am he. Now, there was a significant part in this story that I didn't understand the significance of, that I have a question about. I don't know exactly what they mean. Is it what I'm reading, or was it translated a little differently? I'm not really sure. But what you read is, when he says, I am he, it says that they flew backwards onto the ground. So I'm not really sure if his words literally had power in them and pushed them backwards to the ground, or if they jumped back and maybe some of them fell because they got scared of Jesus. You know, I'm not really exactly sure what that means. If you have a concept of what that means, tell me below. But that is a question I will ask someone who has read the Bible many times. Whether they can answer it or not, I don't know. But I did find that odd. I've never heard that being preached on in a church or anything, so I'm not really sure exactly, because we know Jesus had gifts, I think is what we call them. He could raise the dead, he could make blind people see, he could heal any sickness or anything you had. And so we know that he was a man of many gifts from God. So I'm not sure if when he said, I am he, they freaked out, or maybe it was like, I am he, I'm who you're looking for, and his words had so much power in them. I'm really not sure. So anyways, moving on from that, it was almost as if they didn't believe him, because they had this conversation repeated over again. He said, they said, well, we're looking for Jesus, and he said, well, I just told you I'm him. And so then, and apparently Judas was on their side. He was literally on their side, standing behind or with them. As they approached Jesus, they bound him. So I'm assuming they handcuffed him. They tied his hands, and they brought him to the highest priest. Oh, let me back up. Peter was standing there. Obviously, the rest of his disciples were standing next to Jesus. They were there for a meeting, to meet up, probably to talk about their day or whatever. Now, Peter was next to Jesus. He drew his sword and chopped off one of the priest's servants. So the servant to the priest, they chopped the servant's ear off with his sword. And Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Put your sword back in your sheath. I'm going with them." So this is very significant. This is very important from what I read. So Peter just defended and got offensive or defensive. Allie, lay down. My dog's running back and forth, sorry. So Peter just got very defensive towards Jesus. Like, you can't take him, and, wanted to defend him. So keep that in mind, because as we keep reading, we're going to find something totally the opposite. Okay, so Peter did that. Jesus tells him to stop, put his sword away. I'm just gonna go with them. We're gonna do this. So Peter, wanting to see what happens to Jesus, follows them. So you've got Judas and Peter following them. But Peter is his disciple, right? So you're thinking Peter's on his side. Peter just defended him. Peter just chopped a man's ear off for him. So they decide to bring him to the highest priest, or the high priest. This is where I got a little confused. They named a man, supposedly a man named Annas, like Anna with an S. And then they named another man right below it. I don't know how to say it, but it was like Cephias. I don't know. I butchered that. It's like Caiaphas, something like that. I think the Cephias or whatever is the priest. And Annas was related to him. Don't mark my word for that, because I read that and I couldn't understand it. Again, this is written in such a different context that I will have to have someone else explain to me. It's just, I think, 1 or 2 verses in the Bible. My Bible's right here. I keep looking at it. But if you just read it before I got started, you may understand it better than me. But anyway, so they bring him to the high priest. Let's see. They brought him to the high priest. They went into this place of called like a judgment hall or something like that. So they go into this hall, and then I think the priest showed up, and then Pilate, I'm assuming this is Pontius Pilate, shows up, and he asked the men, the priests, the soldiers, "Why is this man here? What judgment do you have on this man? Like, what has he done wrong?" And they just keep shouting all these things at him. And so he's like, "Are you sure?" And so he goes and talks to Jesus by himself and says, "Well, are you claiming to be a king of the Jews, a king of this world?" And Jesus is like, "No." Or is that what you say, or is that what you just heard? Is that what you think, or is that what people are telling you to think? That's what Jesus tells him. And then he replies, "Well, then who are you?" And Jesus says, "Well, I have a kingdom not of this world. My kingdom is in heaven, and I am the son of that king." And so Pilate's like, "There's nothing wrong with that. That's just what you believe. That's a belief. You're not trying to overthrow the Roman government," in other words, because that's what these priests, Pharisees, soldiers, that's what they thought Jesus was there to do, because ultimately that's what the people of Jerusalem, it even says, if you go back into, I think day 2 of our study, that's what the people of Jerusalem thought. They thought he was there to be a worldly king, to take over Caesar's place, take over Rome, and Jesus was not there for that. That is not what he was there to do. And so Jesus pretty much tells him, "I'm not here for this, to rule this world. That's not what I'm here for." And so Pilate's like, "You didn't do anything wrong then. Like, I don't see anything wrong with you." So he goes back to the priests and the Pharisees and the soldiers, and he's like, "What I don't understand why he's here. Why do y'all have him here? And so they ultimately just kept shouting, crucify him, crucify him. They kept saying according to the word or the rules of the Jews. So there must have been some kind of law system back then that I'm not aware of, don't know what it was. I'm sure we can research it and get some background, but there was some kind of rule. Now, is that a rule that no matter what, if one person claims you did it, then you have to be crucified or punished? I'm not really sure. But in this context, they also mention another man, Barabbas, I think that's how you say it, and he was a thief. So they mention that at the end, and if I'm not mistaken, I haven't read onto the context, so don't take my word, but I think from my prior knowledge of what I got taught in church, I think that was one of the men that was actually crucified next to Jesus, because there was 3 of them crucified at the same time. But I'm not 100% on that. I'm not positive. But anyways, they mention this man, and there's no significance yet to that, so I think that that's to come. But anyways, so Pilate finally, they persuade Pilate, but they kept throwing back in his face that there's rules. There's rules. And so ultimately, it was like Pilate was the judge, kind of like in our judicial system now today in the United States. You go to court, you have a judge. And I'm pretty sure that's what Pilate was, the judge. It was his decision. And so ultimately, he listened to everybody who was chanting and shouting at him and told them that, okay, we'll crucify him, but I don't see anything wrong. I find the man innocent. That's what he said. And so that blows my mind. How do you crucify a man when you think he's innocent? But it was almost as if the people overruled him. Like he didn't stand up for what he believed. He just let the people do it. So anyways, during this time, mind you, remember how I told you Peter went with Jesus? Well, when they got to, I think it says the tent or wherever it was that they were going the first time, when they met the high priest, Peter stood outside of where he was being held, outside the door, and all the soldiers, the men, the priests, the Pharisees that walked by, first he got asked by a woman, and I'm not sure if the woman was Annas that I just talked about. See, I'm a little bit confused on that, but anyways, this woman asked him, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" And he denied it. "No, I'm not. I don't know who that is. I'm not his follower." And you're just standing there thinking, like, how does Peter go from defending Jesus so much that he chops a man's ear off and then turns right around and denies ever knowing him? Blows my mind. So anyways, then he gets asked again by another, I think it was a soldier the second time, and he says no. It might have been Pilate or the soldier, I can't remember, but he says no, I'm not one of his disciples. Then he gets asked a third time, 3 times in this context he gets asked if he is Jesus' disciple, and all 3 times he denies it, says no, I'm not, I don't know him, I have nothing to do with him. And if you remember, if you go back, Peter was told by God, you are going to be tested. Jesus, the sifted like wheat, you're going to be sifted like wheat. That is what Satan has told me. Satan is going to test you. And Peter's like, no, I follow you, I love you, I believe you, I worship you. And then here you are, days later, weeks later, I'm not exactly sure when, but not very long after Jesus just told him, you're going to betray me. Here it is. He betrays him. And he also says in the context before, he says a cock, a rooster, will crow. And that'll be the day, don't mark my word, but he says that's the day you betray me, is the rooster will crow. So the third time after being asked if he's Jesus' disciple, it says, and then the cock crew. So then you have the rooster just crowed. And that right there, when I read it, I immediately remembered the backstory where he just told Peter, "You're going to betray me." And Peter says, "No, I'm not. No." And then here you are. He did it. And just like Jesus said, the rooster crowed. So anyways, let's see. Then the soldiers ended up making a crown of thorns. They placed it on Jesus' head. And at the same time that they did this, see, this is the kind of stuff that I think has been left out, especially in, Vacation Bible School or Sunday school or whatever, to not make it so gory. But I always knew that they made and placed the crown of thorns on his head. I never knew that the soldiers beat him at the same time that they did this. So when they placed the crown, it says that they scuffed him or scolded him with their hands. So obviously that means they beat him with their hands. Whether they punched him, slapped him, whatever. I mean, it's not in detail, but it doesn't need to be, that they beat him. That is not very significant, but to me it is, because not only are they crucifying an innocent man, but now they're placing thorns on his head as an extra punishment or extra just whatever. And then they have the audacity to also beat him, and yet Jesus still loved them. Amazing. So priests and officers wanted him dead. They wanted him crucified. Those are the ones that were chanting. So that's pretty much everything of what I read in the context. So to get into this is going to be a long, oh goodness. Okay. Smack dab in the middle of Jesus' crucifixion story, Peter appears again and shares the stage. He makes some more poor choices. He argues with the Lord about whether he will deny him. See, that's what I was telling you. Peter's like, "No, I won't. I'm not going to no, I would never do that." And he does. He doesn't stay awake and pray. Then instead of leaving the scene, Peter sticks around with the intent of seeing what happens to the Lord. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time will cause multiple problems for Peter. We are all too familiar with this. We're curious. We want to be around where the crowd is. So if there's a fight, what they're trying to say is if there's a fight in the cafeteria or on the school ground or in the middle of the mall, are we not quick to go and look and draw a crowd or join the crowd? We are. It's just in our nature. We want to know what's going on. It's easy to applaud Peter for wanting to be near Jesus, but in order to do that, he had to compromise his beliefs. He had to deny his Lord in order to fit in. Jesus wasn't enough for him because he needed security and popularity. So I don't 100% agree with that outlook on this. I don't think Peter was trying to be popular with the other people. I think personally that he didn't also want to be crucified. I think he denied him because he was scared and did it out of fear, because he wanted to be near Jesus and watch and see what happened to him. But at the same time, he didn't want to be in Jesus' shoes. He did not want to be crucified or beaten or anything like that. Now, that's my personal outlook. That's whoever made this study, they think that he did it for popularity. I don't. But John Piper says that unbelief is the root of all sin. That's just an opinion. Sin was first conceived in the Garden of Eden. The first Adam caved to temptation and disobeyed in unbelief that Jesus was enough for him. He thought God was withholding something good from him. Jesus, the second Adam, in another garden, accepted the cup of death that the Father gave him, knowing that his Father was enough for him. So it's so similar. So they're talking about the story of Adam and Eve when Adam disobeyed God and ate from the forbidden tree, ate the fruit. And God specifically told him not to. And then here you are, you have Jesus in another garden who did exactly as God told him to. His obedience to the Lord saved mankind from themselves and their sinful choices. One day our world will end in another garden, the heavenly city of Revelation 21 through 22. So I've never read Revelations. I don't know exactly how the world is supposed to end. I know what I've been told or taught, but I have never read it. So I'm just going to take this study's word for as I'm reading it. There Jesus will be more than enough for us. We will have need of nothing, and we will want nothing. Until that time comes, how can we live obediently in the light of Christ's sacrifice? God can redeem our past, those Eden sins, that's in parentheses, that caused horrible consequences and have begun a domino effect of destruction. We can't erase the consequences, but we can have victory by claiming Christ's blood. We can ask the Lord to teach us from those experiences so that we gain wisdom for the future. Peter learned from the past, and in the future, we see him not only acclaiming Jesus, but dying for the Lord. So again, I haven't read the whole Bible. I don't know exactly how, when, where Peter dies. But, I mean, they're not going to lie. That's not an opinion. They're telling you what the Bible says. So, and not only dying, but being crucified upside down, not finding himself worthy to die in the same manner as the Lord. See, I did not know that. So that was something that I'll keep in my mind, and eventually I'll get there to where I can read that story. What about the moments where we have a choice between Eden and Gethsemane? So Gethsemane was the garden that Jesus was in when they came and took him. So that's what they're referring to. They're comparing the very first story and the last story of Jesus, pretty much. They're comparing Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and then they're comparing Jesus with his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I may be pronouncing that wrong, but there are some temptations in which he promises to give a way out. 1 Corinthians 10:13. But there are some trials that we must walk through. We have a cross that we all are asked to carry. We can trust that the cup Jesus gives us is a cup mixed by the Father. And therefore we can trust that he has nothing but good in store for us. This life isn't without pain and suffering. If Jesus felt it, we surely have to endure it, whatever. But we can drink the cup knowing that his plan is best for us. Jesus was obedient to the Father. He begged for the cup to be taken from him, but he submitted to the Father's will. The difference is that God had to turn his back on Jesus. He could not look on that sin in his son. See, I'm not really sure about that either. I'm not 100% where they're getting that God turned his back and couldn't look at Jesus. I'm not 100%, and that might be in the next story to come. So, Jesus' sacrifice gained us access into God's family. When we believe that he is enough for us, there's nothing we can't face. Warren Wiersbe says, Eden was the garden of disobedience and sin. Gethsemane was the garden of obedience and submission. And heaven shall be the eternal garden of delight and satisfaction to the glory of God. Now that's just an opinion, that's what somebody said, but I really, really like that. I like that they look at the Garden of Eden as disobedience, destruction, sin, but then you have the Garden of Gethsemane, where there is nothing but purity, obedience, submission. Then you've got the Garden of Heaven, and that's nothing but glory to the God and delight and satisfaction and joy. Just as one man's sin brought death to us all, one man's obedience was imputed to all of us. Let's submit to this grace that gives us what we don't deserve. Let's embrace this mercy that gives us what we do deserve. Let's grab a hold of Jesus, who loved us to death. Jesus is more than enough for us. So that's the end of that, but I pretty much, there's many things that you can take from this. Like I said, I found Peter's disobedience and turning his back on God and Jesus was crazy. I found that way more significant than talking about the gardens, but I liked how I thought about something else and then I was taught something else. So I really, really enjoyed thinking and comparing the two gardens. I really, really enjoyed that, because sometimes when I read the Bible, I get wrapped up in this specific story and I forget there's a much bigger picture of everything, because everything in the Bible, from front cover to back cover, is significant and important. But I really enjoyed that, and I pray that this touches your heart and maybe y'all got something different. But join me back tomorrow for another one. We have a couple more Bible studies to do, but I hope y'all enjoyed this one. This was day, what's the name of it? This is day 5. We have 9, so we have a couple more to go.